Okay, good afternoon and welcome everybody to our webinar today. Thank you ever so much for joining. My name is Greg Bennett at Exertis. I head up our AV Solutions business and I'm very pleased to welcome our a wealth of experience from our panelists today. So we're going to talk a lot about the current state of technology within the education setting. So we're going to have a discussion about that. Just before we get into the discussion, just a bit of housekeeping. For those of you who want to ask any questions, please use the chat box that's provided and we'll do our best to answer those. And a quick word from one of our sponsors, Otterbox, who've kindly supported this event, and they've offered all the attendees a goodie bag. So details of how to redeem those goodie bags will be sent after the session. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. So I guess on to the main event, if I can welcome the panelists to the discussion. And if I could ask the guys to introduce themselves initially. Ed, could you start us off, please?
Yeah, sure. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Many thanks for taking the time out this afternoon. My name's Ed Fairfield. I'm Vice Chair at an education charity called NACE. We support schools with implementation of education technology. I'm also a school governor overseeing ICT and commercial manager at a technology reseller called Elementary Technology. Happy to be here today.
Thank you, Ed. And just going from right to left on my screen, Jonathan.
Good afternoon. Hello, yeah, Jonathan Clark from Poly. Thank you very much for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be here. I suppose my closest connection to teaching is that I'm married to one, and I've got a daughter that's doing teaching currently, so I'm getting real life feedback. But obviously, how Poly's adapted and changed. It's a pleasure to be talking about some of our solutions, hopefully, or some of the challenges that we can overcome with our stuff. So.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. And Matt.
Hi, yeah, so my name is Matt Waring. I'm the Education Channel Manager at Logitech. So I've come to Logitech after spending about the last 12 years working for a number of educational resellers across a range of areas, supporting large-scale projects. And education is a real key focus area for us. So I joined Logitech recently, where I'll be supporting all of our UK channel partners across K-12, further education, higher education, and hopefully, having been in the shoes of a lot of our reseller partners, I should know exactly what's needed to support you with any opportunities and projects that you have.
Thank you, Matt. And Matuza?
Yep. Hi, everyone. My name is Murtuza. I am the Microsoft Alliances Manager at Poly. Work closely with Microsoft and a Microsoft channel. In my capacity, I also speak with a lot of public sector and educational institutions, so work closely with some folks at Microsoft who are managing that vertical. Yep, that's me.
Thanks, Matuza. And Megan, all the way from Florida in the US?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So my name is Megan. I'm our Business Development Manager at ScreenBeam, taking care of some things in North America as well as in EMEA. Also a former educator, so I taught in the classroom for 10 years, elementary, but I also do trainings and used to train for Microsoft as a Microsoft Learning Consultant and a Global Learning Ambassador, and just really excited to be here to extend that experience to kind of what's happening in the world today. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Megan. And Ross, who's also on his holidays this week. Thank you for joining, Ross.
No problem. Thanks, Greg. Hi, I'm Ross Soden. I head up new channel development for Samsung. Most recently, we've been spending the last 18 months realigning our education focus, not just at Key Stage 12, but also higher and further education. And I've led the engagement with DFE over the last 18 months as Samsung re-enter the Windows and Chrome market on compute.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Paul.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Paul Edge. I'm probably the odd one on the panel. I'm the Deputy Head at Ribblesdale High School, and I also, alongside that, I'm the EdTech Demonstrator Lead for our consortium, but also a Microsoft Learning Consultant and head up the Showcase School as well. So thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you, Paul. And if I may, we may start with you, if that's all right, Paul. If you could set us off in terms of, obviously, technology in the education setting has changed massively in the last 12, 18 months. Could you give us a view or insight from your perspective at an end user level?
Absolutely. I think, yeah, it's been unprecedented really in terms of education. If you reflect back on where education's come from, I think there are certain schools that were sort of doing EdTech in a big way like ourselves, but a lot were sort of testing the water around the edges, but were a little bit scared to go in, but that's been forced upon them. And I think that there were a lot of challenges initially as we sort of flipped into remote learning and sort of crisis management, I suppose. And I know a lot of my colleagues relied heavily on various partners and suppliers to enable them to do that back at the start of 2020. I think sort of the situation we're in now, obviously, we've been in and out a couple of times, and we're now essentially into a hybrid situation. If I sit here now in school, we've probably got about 3/5 of our school not here at the moment. We're missing 2 year groups and bits of other ones. So we are certainly in a hybrid situation in the terms of deliveries going live in the classroom, but also being streamed in our case through Microsoft Teams, but supported by other products. And I think for education in the short to medium term, this is going to be the normal. We will have young people, unfortunately, that have to stay away from school physically, but need to be able to access the learning diet and the curriculum as we move forward. And I think what a lot of schools are now doing is starting to reflect on EdTech generally, and how do we make the good bits stick, and how do we work out what the good bits are. And our core business is teaching and learning. It isn't technology per se, and therefore we need the support of the expertise that's out there, such as the colleagues on this panel this afternoon, to guide us through that. I think the other challenge is making sure that sort of suppliers and partners also have that awareness of what the demands are on school at the current time, but also moving forwards. And I think that the scary bit for educators, and particularly for school leaders and head teachers and principals, is that EdTech can be a scary place to be, particularly if you've got good outcomes and everything's working as it should. I suppose the question is, why bother? And I think a lot of that why bother has been answered over the past sort of 18 months or so, but it's also about our young people as well, giving them the skills to succeed as they move forward into whatever their future careers are. There's lots of opportunity, there's lots of uncertainty, but I think it's a really exciting time for us as educators to start working with partners and suppliers as we move forward in whatever the short and medium long term brings us.
Thanks, Paul. And in terms of the opportunity then for a lot of our reseller partners on the call listening in, I guess, Ed, could I ask you, what kind of opportunities has that opened up for the reseller community?
Yeah. It's an enormous opportunity. It's a win-win situation for all parties, from teachers, to pupils, to retailers, distributors such as Exertis, and the future, I suppose, of our country as well. I think in the past 10 years, particularly since austerity kicked in and Vector was disbanded, and wise Michael Gove came in and chopped it all up a little bit. EdTech and technology and education has been important, but not really urgent. And there's been budget cuts, and it's kind of been shoved under the carpet, kicked the tin down the alley. There's been lots of sticking plasters and kind of make do and mend type mentality, and a positive legacy of all this disruption will be bringing it into the important urgent quadrant. Like it or not, you have to use it, and it's in fact a legal obligation for a school to implement remote learning scheme, which is, if I may say, is a great opportunity for a reseller, for a vendor, because schools are skilled educators, they're teachers, and they're responsible for the nurture of the next generation from an academic, social perspective. They're not technology experts by and large. So in terms of the opportunity and the responsibility, for our slot next to Leeds Bradford Airport. That'll be the 14th to Malaga going over. Lucky people. Yeah, it's an opportunity and a responsibility to make sure that we provide accurate, independent advice and kind of guidance to schools to make sure that they make the right choice for them. It's very easy to hang it and bang it and sell it, and lots of resellers, unfortunately, are very inclined to do that. It's also very easy to supply exactly what the school asks for. Bear in mind, they're not technology experts. Often they perhaps don't ask for the right thing, and that's where the independent expertise and advice comes in, and that's where the partnership comes in for the good of schools delivering better education for their community, for their children. So opportunity and responsibility, I think, from a supply chain perspective.
Yeah, I think you make a very good point there, and I think it's pulling back to what Paul said, that he was in a privileged position in that they were they were pretty accustomed to the modern hybrid sort of teaching experience. Other schools not so lucky. So I think from a reseller opportunity, it's understanding what the current infrastructure of those environments are. As you say, the teaching environments, it's not not traditionally throwing lots of video down a stream or anything like that, or that type of thing. So it's understanding infrastructure-wise where they are on this journey from traditional teaching methods to this new way of hybrid teaching that Paul's executing so successfully today. But again, I think it's a challenge for everyone, and any expertise, knowledge that these guys have out there, you can certainly share that amongst the schooling and education sector.
I mean, from a Logitech point of view, it's interesting. There was already a trend of increased use of hybrid learning that we were seeing, but I think that it's fair to say the pandemic has accelerated this at a huge scale. So institutions are suddenly forced to change and adapt at a very challenging pace, as has already been covered. But that almost presents an opportunity to really look at how teaching's delivered as well. I think the new opportunity that's coming out of all this is where we've got almost the stopgap solutions of last summer, where I need a laptop, any laptop, I need a webcam, any webcam, and supply was a real issue across the entire sector. Now this is the norm, and so it's a case of really looking at a sustainable way to manage it and provide those kind of products that do the job properly, rather than ones that just meet an immediate need, because as Paul was saying, you have to adapt straight away and do it there and then. But now we're really looking forward and looking at the options that are there to do that.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Sorry, Megan.
Please
go.
I was just going to comment on that. So, just like with what you were all saying about, not just throwing technology, just say, hey, these are the best and greatest, whatever, and just throwing it together, but actually, listening to the end customer, to what their needs are, what are they wanting to accomplish. Like, for instance, I'll do a shameless plug for ScreenBeam here, but if you want your teachers to be mobile, if you want your content to be displayed, do you want to hear, do you want to see, all these things where you have all of our partners can come together in that ecosystem and approach a customer together with our solutions, instead of trying to be a one size fits all kind of thing. So a lot of, especially in the States, we're just seeing a lot of districts just shifting in, wanting to future proof. So something like this happens again, or things like that, that we're able to do that. And as a manufacturer, really had to shift, and most of our tech adoption is all about the ease of use, because we don't want our teachers to have to learn one more thing, right? We want to be able to have them use technology that they either can adapt to easily, but we want to be able to create those tools where they're not having to recreate their instruction. So I feel like us all together have those tools that we can support schools and be able to push that out together, as instead of little piecemeal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, Megan, there's a really good point there from an educator's perspective and a school leader's perspective. There are a few things we're trying to achieve with EdTech at the moment. Number one is potentially, if it goes sideways completely again, then we can react to that and then limit the amount of downtime, essentially. But I think you made a good point about using technologies such as ScreenBeam, which we use to, untether teachers from the front of the classroom and have done for a number of years. But the whole teaching space, even if we're physically in school, is changing. So, for example, TA supporting those with additional needs has traditionally been a physical person sat in a room next to them. Well, that's not going to happen anymore for us at Ribblesdale. In most cases, that will be done remotely, and therefore there's a demand for headsets so the TA can support multiple children over different lessons in the same period. And it's just a different way of working. And I think the one thing that's become absolutely clear is some young people thrive using and having technology woven into their curriculum diets. It allows us to self-regulate our learning. If I reflect, and we all reflect, how do we learn at home if we need to do something? Well, generally we go and find a video clip that shows how to do it. Do we watch it from start to finish? No, we don't. We stop it, rewind it, slow it down, look at it, do it again. That's how young people learn. If I reflect on my own sons at home, how do they know how to drive Minecraft? Well, I can do it a little bit, but I can't do it to the extent they are, and it's all online. So we need to harness how our young people want to learn and learn outside of school, but using all these different tools and technologies that are available to us. So it's really looking at how technology can, I suppose, provide the confidence that you can react if we need to again, but also in more normal running, whatever that looks like, that we're looking at how the structure of a school runs.
Absolutely, Paul. And a good point Paul made, and I don't know, most of us might be following Microsoft Inspire that's going on right now. And yesterday there was a session on digital optimism, and there was so much spoken about, right, in education and so many other verticals. And I think I would pick on that word and I'd say digital optimism in education. And Paul mentioned that there are so many things that you can do now with technology which you could not have imagined in traditional learning environments. But is that the only answer? No, but I think somewhere in between, hybrid is an answer. You have the classroom environment where you have the personal touch, you have the face-to-face interaction, you've got a lot more attentiveness, and then you have this go back home and or a remote learning environment, and that can bring in a lot of inclusion as well. So you can include people from various backgrounds, you can include people from so many different learning capabilities. Somebody wants to go slower, they want to slow it down, watch the clip 10 times to understand, and there are the others that sort of want to do 2x and go that fast on a 40-minute video and just finish it in 20 minutes. So those kind of things are possible, being able to stream, being able to transcribe, being able to search from keywords on the lectures, and almost sort of bring that 360 learning experience. And I think that's what's possible now with technology.
Absolutely, bringing that learning beyond the classroom walls, and it's not like that anymore. So we really had to all adjust, or I can say that the buzzword pivot, right?
I think that does also highlight one of the biggest challenges, which is the have-nots. I think the last data we saw, there was circa 3.6 million students that didn't have a device, or they were sharing devices in the household. That's before we even start addressing, connectivity as well, and the bandwidth areas that people struggle to be able to get whatever is required. So I think we've seen some of that coming through with DFE with their project last year, trying to address some of that. I think it's piecemeal compared to the number of children that don't have a device or adequate broadband today.
Mm.
Yeah.
And Ed, if I could pick up on a point you mentioned earlier about almost legislation being set now around the standards of tech within education. Is there now a different approach to the way frameworks are being produced, and how our reseller partners can maybe respond to those frameworks? Because it's now about that equality of experience, isn't it? Not just about the product, it's about that equality of experience which we talked about last time.
Yes.
Is there now a different approach to that?
Yes, it is. Well, inclusion is a big buzzword where learners have equal access to learning, and that applies whether they're in the in the classroom or at home. It also applies within the classroom. So, for example, voice reinforcement technology. So, if you have pupils with hard of hearing pupils in the classroom, they're disadvantaged because they can't from an audio perspective, hear the lesson as effectively. So inclusion across the board is essential. That also applies from a teacher perspective as well. So teachers need the same level of, they need to be empowered equally to deliver effective teaching. So for example, if a school has different levels of technology in different classrooms, it's unfair on the teacher, it's unfair on the pupil, because there isn't that equality of provision and access. A step beyond that, and Ross talked about the have-nots and the delivery of large numbers of laptops and tech. That's kind of the very, very beginning of the process. So if I'm a school, I receive 200 Chromebooks. I don't know what to do with them. Some of my teachers might have a fairly decent grasp. Some of them won't. So delivery of technology is the very beginning. So you're kind of on that journey, but if you want that equality and inclusion of access, you need to make sure teachers understand how to make best use of that technology. I think the EdTech demo schools, which Paul is a driving force of, I think that's essential, and that's very powerful. I think the DFE and the government can do more of that and make sure that it's more widely available to more schools. I know there's a ceiling capacity on delivery, but we're getting there. We've got more to do, and there is a gap there that resellers and vendors can help fill. And it's making sure that teachers and learners have equality of access to tech, making sure they all know what they're doing to an equal extent. And the result is that inclusion. Again, going back to responsibility of the sales channel, along with the DFE, the EdTech demonstrator school provision.
And along with that, Ed, going on with, our responsibility in being in this space is that, we're not just kind of delivering that technology and saying good luck, being able to actually adjust, at least on the ScreenBeam side, I'm sure with you all as well, is that really having to up our game on the PD part, because we want to make sure that every district we work with, that they have the right access. So teachers need those right solutions for a contactless environment, or we understand now that learning is going to be taking place in a redesigned space. So we have to be able to have scalable and simple solutions with long-term in mind. And I feel like that's something like with what you said about, making it equal, and how are we able to do that? Because now, okay, you've got a good device, great. Well, what can you do with it? Are you leveraging, Office 365, Canvas, or Google Classroom, things like that? How are you leveraging that, and how can we make it that much better? Because we probably all come into districts where this is what we're supposed to be doing, and even though it just doesn't make sense for them. So I feel like it's our responsibility to kind of help bridge that gap on, okay, we learned last year, you guys got the technology, but let's kind of now take that to the next level. So I think that's very important.
Yeah, and I think there's an opportunity for schools to be more demanding. I hate to say it, of resellers. We, with my NACE hat on, when a school approaches NACE looking for advice, often they've procured their new technology from a supplier, of course. I don't really know what the power of they've got. The metaphor I use in other areas is they bought a Ferrari equivalent, but they don't know it has a gearbox, so they're driving around in first gear, and they're none the wiser. It's shiny, it's sleek, it's great, it's got gadgets, but it also has a gearbox. You need to supercharge it, and until you get that training and support, you don't know. You're missing out that opportunity.
I guess I'm hearing a lot that there's almost a shift and a reliance on our reseller community and vendors and distributors alike to become that trusted advisor to education and actually focus on services and adoption, etc. So I guess as another question, how can integrators add more value to their customers in this channel?
I think it's probably a case of understanding the use case, as you said, really. I mean, it's probably fair to say that some students that struggled in the classroom will flourish in a virtual environment, and probably vice versa as well. So it's just making sure that everyone can be kind of seen and heard. So teachers need, just to go back to this kind of technology side of things, but teachers need high quality webcams. They don't just need a laptop to teach from. They need a high quality webcam. They need headsets, microphones to ensure they're engaging, that they can be seen, that they can be heard. Same for the pupils as well, headsets to block out that distraction and to help them focus. So it's really an opportunity for our resellers to talk about that use case and what teaching looks like from the institutions to make sure it's being adequately addressed. And it's, to be frank, it's quite a big upsell opportunity in terms of attach. You know, it's, as I say, it's not just about the laptop, it's about making sure that equipment is suitable and sustainable for long-term use and prolonged use throughout the day as well.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point. I think it's making it as simple as possible so that, you know, we've talked about teachers teaching, we've talked about students learning. They don't want to be tied up with pressing different types of buttons. It's got to be as seamless and as hands-off as possible. So if it's a USB attached headset, plug in and it goes. If it's a USB camera and you want that freedom to move, it tracks. You don't have to pick up a remote control to change some of the settings on the camera. It just follow you as a teacher. So it's keeping it that simple. And then, you know, if they do need some support in that, obviously adoption services. In fact, in pre-planning, it's just working with you talked about use cases, how you're going to use this stuff, what is your end game? Is it purely Teams? Is it other services that you need to use? It's how it's going to be used in the future that you just need to make sure that you're providing the right guidance. It's you're not just buying now and then being stuck in a particular environment. It does need that flexibility to move and grow and change as you use this stuff, and think about how, you know, you can use it today in remote learning, but, you know, do you want to then use it for remote, you know, parent-teacher association classes, somebody that might not be able to make it into a, you know, parent that's working that can't make there. You've invested in this technology for the teaching. Why not use it after school? Why not use it in other particular environments? So it's getting them to think about, you know, the immediate challenge and then how they can use this technology. If they're making that investment, how can they get the best use out of it using it in a different variety of scenarios?
Yeah, and just to add to what Jonathan said, I think technology should make it easy for the educators to educate. It should not become like an obstruction. It can't come in the way. To allow the educators to focus on what they really need to focus, like the personal attention to the learners, or the kind of on the topics or the subject. They have too much on their mind going on to worry about zooming in or zooming out, or some sort of a distraction coming into the classroom and stuff like that. So I think it's important that the technology layer remains almost invisible and does what it needs to do.
That's a really good point, actually. My mantra is it should just work. Technology should just work. It shouldn't get in the way. It shouldn't hinder. Teachers and educators are a fickle beast, and if you upset them and they lose confidence, you're going to lose them for months, if not years, around technology anyway. So it's very much about the, you know, and lots of you mentioned various aspects there, but it's about that training, that confidence in using it. And for me, what I look for from a sort of a vendor or a supplier or partner is what other value can you add for my school? What is, you know, a bit of kit, a widget is a widget, and I can go elsewhere for a widget, but what is that going to do for me? But it's also, and I think, you know, Jonathan touched on this, it's not only about how you use it within the physical classroom during a normal school day, but it's what else can it do for me? You know, most of our parents' evenings now are going to be online. Parental or customer feedback is we don't want to come in school again very much because we hate the old model of queuing up and all that type. So they want to do it from the comfort of their own home. So we're now parents' evenings, the majority are online. Therefore, I need to make sure I've got webcams, headsets, all that type of stuff, not only to support teaching and learning, but also to support that parents-educator interaction. So there's a lot of opportunities here, and I think I would class educators, a lot of educators are very digitally aware, but they don't class themselves as being digitally competent, and therefore we need people like yourselves and your organisations and to provide that wraparound to make it straightforward for them just to carry on, because technology for me and for other educators is another teaching and learning tool in your toolkit. And therefore, if it works and it makes it easy, you're going to draw on it. It might impact teacher workload, for example. You know, it's going to, I think Ed touched on it, supporting those learners with additional needs, using learning tools in Office 365. But to use learning tools, you might need a headset for some learners, you're going to need a device. how we're going to do that and how's that CPD going to be wrapped around it. So that there is lots to think about, but ultimately it should just work.
Yes, I think
what's
teachers
really
are,
interesting
yeah.
there, Paul. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, what's really interesting there is actually outside of procuring hardware and the duty of care by the reseller community to make sure that the schools are contingency planning for any potential lockdowns, but it's also how we service the equipment when it's not in a central location. And some of the information and some of the work that Microsoft has done around hybrid working can be applied inside the school environment as well.
I'm not sure if we've lost Ross there.
Yeah.
That we've heard from businesses is the old service models of having somebody that manages IT is all of the repairs is just not going to be sufficient moving forward. So how can partners support schools with on-site services? Can you hear me now? Sorry, guys.
Yes, we can, Ross. Yeah, just about.
Can you hear me?
I think we've got the gist of that in terms of, I guess, standards and serviceability, right? For the disbursement of a lot of the technology now, it's not just in one place. So, I guess how are our vendors and manufacturers sort of dealing with that?
I guess from a Poly perspective, in terms of the management, obviously creating headsets, personal devices, these webcams, you're adding additional, obviously quality and improving the service, but then there's that management overhead that you've got to consider. So, part of our proposition from a Poly perspective is that we don't just provide the hardware devices themselves, we provide the central console and the central management for the poor IT person who's been challenged enough managing room systems. You're now throwing in some cameras and some headsets, and you could just see the color draining from his face. He's got all this, oh no, not more added technology. So it's not just across the whole environment, it's having a centralized solution. We call it PolyLens, a single pane of glass that you can identify your devices. You can see whether they're on or off, any problems, they're on the right software level. Because it's interesting, Paul mentioned poor old teachers, they're working hard enough as it is. You don't want, I think a lot of people have found when they're doing homeschooling what a challenge it is homeschooling a couple of kids. When you've got a whole classroom of 30, they don't want to be worried about the technology. They're working hard enough as it is. I've been working from home. I sneak off for an early morning run at 6:30. I can see my old next door neighbour who's a teacher walking to school at 6:45 to start her day. So you think actually there's a lot going on, throwing technology at them, whether that is them using it, whether that's the IT function that's managing those devices. You need to give them the tools so that they can continue and manage those devices, but not overburden the poor teacher who's challenged enough, I think, as it is.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Megan. I was just going to say, I think one of the key areas as well is having a portfolio of products that specifically addresses education. So it's things like making sure there's an additional warranty in there to make it a sustainable deployment model, extra educational features. So is it rugged? Is the cable can the cable be chewed through, for instance, things like that, considerations as much as that. But ring fence stop, making sure that with tablet cases they're sent in packs of 10 rather than engineers having to individually unbox every single case for every single iPad across the institution, and ring fencing stock for resellers and stuff like that as well. Not just retail products being shipped in, but making sure that there is proper education channel stock that's reserved purely for our reseller partners. I think that really helps.
And thank you, Matt. I was just also going to mention where you were saying, Jonathan, about with teachers kind of, and just another thing, excuse me, that they're having to learn or deal with. So as a former educator, and as I'm sure Paul can attest to this as well, is that when you're in a classroom or in a district or a school setting where you're trying different technologies, and I cannot imagine Paul being able to just adapt and this is what you're expected, and lots of respect for educators that went through that last year, and I feel like, with that being said, us as a ecosystem of technology options for those districts is we kind of need to take maybe that bundled approach where how everything works together in that ecosystem, because it's very beneficial. Great, we got Poly, we got Samsung, we got ScreenBeam, we got Logitech, awesome. well, how do these all work together? How does it integrate? And I understand, that's a lot of responsibility too internally. However, I think it's, our responsibility to kind of, step up and kind of make that connection. So it's one less thing that they have to worry about, oh, I need to make sure that, my screen beam's connected to my Samsung display and I have this and that. But, there's sometimes you lose teachers, when there's a million other things because they're worried about, whether the child ate breakfast that morning. They're balancing so many different things. So I just think it's just important when we approach districts or we're at, working with resellers, that we keep that in mind as well.
That's a good point, Megan. Actually, I was going to ask in terms of what initiatives can we all undertake to kind of aid with improving sort of teacher confidence in technology. Ed, do you have a view on that in terms of what can we do better? What initiatives can we undertake to aid that teacher confidence?
Yeah, I've got lots of views on that, and I think it starts at the very beginning of deciding what a school wants to buy. So from an end user teacher perspective, if a few pallets of shiny technology turn up and I don't really know what they are, it's immediately a barrier to, there's an element of mistrust or caution about it perhaps, and it's a barrier to kind of embracing it and using it to full effect. So as a buyer, I think there's work that a buyer can do to make sure, again, inclusion, the users are included in that buying process and that decision-making process. So for example, a reseller can facilitate a demonstration in a school, and all of those end users, as well as the business manager, ICT decision maker, perhaps can get involved. So again, a reseller can help guide the buyer through that kind of journey initially, and then when the tech arrives, they know what to expect. They're excited and they're pumped, and they're like, right, I want to learn how to use it and I want to make best use of it. And that's by no means the end. From a reseller supplier's responsibility then comes not the initial training session of how to turn it on. Then comes the kind of the ongoing tailored support over months and perhaps years, firmware updates, software updates, and technology evolves. You get new starters. It's an ongoing relationship that a reseller needs to engage with, and ultimately, if you build that trust with your customer, they're more likely to come back to you and buy some more tech. It's a win-win, really, and I think too few resellers understand that.
I think that's a really good point, that Ed, in terms of the trust, because ultimately, generally educators and schools and senior leaders will stick with one place if they've got that trust and that respect, and everything's moving in the right direction. So to build that initially, I think resellers and suppliers need to have an understanding more of the education space. So I've done supporting certain resellers in how what we're about, what goes on. It's okay if you sat at a desk on a phone, but actually what physically is going on within that school. How does it work? What are we looking for in the short, medium, longer term? How's that going to fit? And I think what you've just described there, Ed, is that sort of having that vision and supporting the vision of the school from a teaching and learning perspective, and how can technology enhance that delivery as we move through that process. And just going back to a previous conversation, things like the whole package in terms of, if I was to put a screen beam into Ribblesdale and then that screen beam on a screen failed, then my educator is going to go mad at me because they can't connect to the board and carry on that delivery and be remote and mobile around the classroom. They're going to have to tether up at the front again. So therefore, we do need things like Hotspurs on site that our IT team feel confident with. You know, I run a one-to-one scheme with 1,350 devices. I can't have a young person without a device in school, so therefore I have to run that Hotspur, and that applies to whatever bit of kit it is. And it's having that awareness that we can't just manage without it. If I take in all money, if I was to if a pen fails or runs out of ink, I can't turn around to that kid or that educator, no, you're not having another one because we haven't got one. It's got to carry on. So therefore, we need to make sure that is absolutely there.
Absolutely, and just like you said, if the screen beam goes out or drops, or something happens with a different technology, you lose those teachers, then they will write that product off. So that's where we pride ourselves on, when we have lots of firmware updates and things like that we're constantly changing to meet the needs with our customers, because our company is 60% research and development. So we're constantly trying to figure out with data information from our end customers, like, hey, how can we make this better? How can we leverage our technologies and things like that? So I feel like it's very important, just like you said, to be able to also make sure your IT is on board as well. But how are they going to manage it at that level? And I think that's really important.
Yeah, and a good point, Megan. Tying that back to what Greg asked previously about what's the reseller or the partner's role, how can they add value? I think services, sort of consulting and services, is a really good layer that they need to add value on. Services, something breaks, if someone can't find or figure out how to do, the first point of contact is usually a reseller or a partner, saying, hey, what, can you help me figure this out? Can you send me some documentation? Can you come and do a day's worth of training? At the same time, so Poly, through our partners, we also offer services that's pre-installation. So we come in and do a whole survey of what the sort of landscape looks like, what the premises are, what's the best way, what are the solutions that you can go, Poly and non-Poly solutions. Okay, we also sort of offer through our partners warranty and support services, and I'm sure same is the case with Samsung, Logitech, and some of the other vendors. I think these services are really important especially for educational institutions, because they really don't want that to come in the way of their mission.
Absolutely, because you don't want a frustrated educator that doesn't know how to work something and can't find the answer, right? So you want to be able, just as a reseller, to kind of be just side by side, like you said, Ed, kind of attacking it together, and then you create that trusted advisor role almost, that and they're going to keep coming back to you because they trust you. Absolutely.
And that, just to chip in there, that trust and mutual understanding starts at the beginning, stating the obvious. You hear a lot of resellers, suppliers talking about tackling the gatekeeper, the evil gatekeeper, and it's like they're going into battle, talking to Mrs. Miggins on reception, and not to stereotype the demographic of a lady behind reception. But when you meet Mrs. Miggins, when you meet the gatekeeper, they're lovely people. They're not evil. They're not, they're not kind of primed for battle. But that's how a supplier will often approach them on the phone. Right, how am I going to overcome these objections? Right, okay. Here, they kind of get their armor on, and it's the wrong approach, and you're getting off on the wrong foot. I think the industry needs to kind of get over that. That's kind of 10, 20 years out of date.
I equally feel sorry for Mrs. Miggins after that. Just taking a shift slightly, focusing on the children, as some have clearly found remote learning hard and some have really excelled. I guess one of the questions is, how do we ensure more children excel at remote learning? Paul, would you like to take that?
Yeah, I think the secret is give them options as to how they want to learn. So someone like that didactic in-class traditional lecture style teaching, whereas others will want more of a blend and have the options so they can choose how they want to learn is probably the way I see it. I think with technology, it sort of opens up lots of doors in terms of different options that probably our young people are more confident with. You know, they are digital natives, aren't they? You know, they don't have that confidence with technology, particularly linked to education generally, but that is their go-to place. So if we can enhance the good pedagogy that goes on in teaching and learning traditionally using technology, so they can access that education, that learning when they want and where they want. I think Megan mentioned that it is about giving them the options there. And I think the other thing that technology does is it does link and really start to give options in terms of pulling in the wider community, parents and people like that to support that process. You know, the difference between young people in terms of reading age, a lot of it's driven by how much they were read to at home. But boys hate reading, particularly in the traditional format. But if you put a device in front of a boy and ask them to read something on that, then they're more likely to do it. And therefore, we need to keep that going. And if that option's there, then that's using the technology to hook them into something that's fundamental and allows them to access all curriculum areas, because reading ages, for example, of exam papers is only going up and up and up. So we need to make sure that technology can enhance that wherever possible.
I think as well, it's a good case of making sure that appropriate equipment is provided. So it's not just a keyboard, it's a keyboard designed to support their well-being, their posture, their comfort. There was a really interesting study around iPad use and on-screen keyboards, and it found that on a study of children aged 10 to 17, it could exert the equivalent pressure of 60 pounds on their neck when using an on-screen keyboard. So obviously it's not actually 60 pounds, but the equivalent key developmental stage for those children. So by giving them an external keyboard, it just relieves that pressure straight away, and that obviously has a big knock-on effect of things like concentration and things like that throughout the school day. So some really key considerations where, yes, they've got a keyboard on screen, but is it the right keyboard? Could it be an external one? Could it be a tablet keyboard case? And I think considerations like that apply to all aspects of technology that they're using.
Yeah, a great point, Matt, about sort of concentration and sort of use of this and good statistics there. I believe I'm taking this example from the corporate side. One of the things that need to be eliminated is distractions. I think distraction reduces focus and thereby creates learning difficulty. There's one stat from the corporate world that we say that if someone's distracted, it takes 23 minutes for them to get back on track to what they were originally on. So I'm sure even learners are humans, right? So it must imply the same might imply for them as well. So I think to keep them less distracted from external noises, making sure the educators have the right equipment, eliminating the outside noises, and even the learners, things like having the proper equipment in terms of keyboard, mouse, but also headsets and any equipment that sort of allows them to focus rather than get distracted. I think that's important as well.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and I guess it depends where they are in that learning life cycle and what age they are, because it's obviously going to prepare them for the new ways of working once they move from the education into actual work. It's going to give them that maturity to actually say, I can work on my own, I can fit into this new way of working. So whether I'm in the office, whether I'm at home, it's a great learning environment for them to prepare themselves and get ready for the new ways of working once they've left that schooling environment as well. So
that's really important, that, Jonathan, from my perspective. You know, one thing, the reason why we went down technology in a big way was to give skills for the future for our young people, but it's that self-regulation. You know, we've all worked at home more over the past 12, 18 months than we probably ever have done, but it's about, you know, when to switch off and when to draw on the right bit of kit to support that process, whatever it may be. And if our young people are confident with those skills as they move forward, then ultimately it adds value to them. It makes them more employable, and that's you know, part of our role as in schools is to give them those wider skills and digital literacy and skills and keeping safe and using the right kit at the right time so it's not causing any issues in terms of a physical nature. Then ultimately that is something we've got to make sure is happening more and more now as young people use more and more technology.
Thanks, Paul. And Megan, if I can ask, as a former educator yourself, there's a lot of debate around the benefits of remote versus on-prem learning. You know, what's your kind of opinion on that? What's better, do you think? And how do we support a fair balance is probably the right question.
Right. So, I mean, I feel like this is a tough one because, you know, I feel like there's benefits to on-prem and remote, honestly. And so, just like you said with Paul, that you have to really give that hybrid approach is my personal opinion, and giving them that choice, because you may have those students, and I think we mentioned this earlier, where they're in class and, you know, maybe that just wasn't working for them. That wasn't maybe the traditional style, or maybe it was more modern, but maybe just didn't fit them. And so if they're able to be remote, and maybe they're thriving in that environment. So it's just, I really believe in choice. Like when I was in the classroom, we were actually a one-to-one classroom, a Microsoft Showcase school. And this was like 6 years ago, 5, 6 years ago. And, you know, my biggest thing there was the equity piece, but now we're there now. So what are we going to do about it? So if they have that technology, those, you know, the headphones and things like that, where and webcams where they can be home and still be interactive, and, you know, maybe go take their dog for a walk during lunch or something that, you know, we really have to be able to hit too on the social emotional learning as well. And I feel like that goes hand in hand with remote and on-prem. So I feel like it really depends on the child, what the family wants, and obviously having the institution support that as well.
Completely agree with Megan there, really. I think it's fair to say that hybrid learning is here to stay. There's the Pew Research Centre study from January this year that I talk about a lot because I think it's really important. It looked at technology use in a typical school day. So pre-pandemic, 35 minutes in a school day. During the pandemic, 4.5 to 5 hours, and post-pandemic expected it will be 2.5 to 3 hours. So yeah, hybrid learning choice is here to stay. I think the important opportunity for our resellers is that it's not a case of stopgap make do anymore. It's about long-term sustainable use and getting the right products to the right learners to ensure that all learning styles can focus, can be productive, and regardless of what that hybrid classroom may look like. And I think there's probably enough vendors and partners on the call here that we can accurately address all of those requirements.
Absolutely. And I'll do another shameless plug. Like with ScreenBeam, it doesn't matter what operating system you have anymore. So really the limitations aren't there as they were maybe a couple of years ago with our technology. So being able to really, you know, utilize whatever they want to be able to get what they need and still get that learning. And it's just looks a little bit different now. And I feel like it makes some people uncomfortable. But again, that's kind of where we have to take that responsibility to make sure that we give them the tools that they need to be successful and kind of come at it together.
Great, thank you very much. I'm just conscious of time as well, although I do feel like we could continue talking for a lot longer. Yeah, I hope our guests who've joined found that insightful and useful. I thought it was a really interesting discussion, and I'm ever so grateful for the panelists joining us today. Thank you very much. If anybody does have any questions, my details will be available after the call, so please feel free to get in touch, and do look out for your instructions on how to receive your goodie bag, which I'm sure you're all intrigued to see as well. But again, panelists, thank you very much. Everybody at home, thank you for joining as well.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you very much. Bye all.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.